I'd like to welcome you to our annual Day of Remembrance. Today we take the time to remember those that we've lost in the past year. Today's ceremony may bring tears or laughter, but we hope it brings peace in your heart. Quoting an Eskimo proverb, perhaps they are not stars, but rather openings in heaven, where the love of our lost ones pours through and shines down upon us to let us know they are happy. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm ready.
Today, the journey ends for you, and your freedom lives on. Your battle boots move into the world, leaving freedom with its marks. We honor you for being strong and for holding our country's heart. Your last salute will never die. We see it everywhere. The skies, the lands, and the seas cry out your name in victory. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere. Today, we honor all you've done to keep our country free. You traveled the world and made your mark to let our freedom ring. We honor you for being strong and for holding our country's heart. Your last salute will never die. We see it everywhere. The skies, the lands, and the seas cry out your name in victory. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere. Today, this last salute for you goes on so endlessly. We pray for you, honor you, and hold you in our hearts. We honor you for being strong and for holding our country's heart. Your last salute will never die. We see it everywhere. The skies, the lands, and the seas cry out your name in victory. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere. We feel it everywhere.
Almighty and merciful God, we remember before you this moment our departed comrades. We recall with reverence the good they accomplished. We honor those who fought a good fight for a just cause. Comrades both in war and in peace who have served this country with dignity and honor. May they rest in peace. May we consecrate our hearts and lives to our God, and to our country, and to the ideals and principles and the hopes of those who we honor today, who have served faithfully and are now at rest. Amen.
Florence Alexopoulos. Flo described herself as a housewife, but in today's society, she would be known as a stay-at-home mom, doing what she loved best, taking care of her children and her husband. She said she was a quiet person who loved reading books, listening to music, or watching TV. She did not like crowds or loud noises, but if Dino, her husband, also known as Constantine, was going to the bike rallies, music performances, and other activities, Flo would go along too. She said marrying Dino was the best decision she had ever made, and that the pride and joy of their lives were their children. Flo mentioned her favorite color was red and had special memories of Christmas with her children decorating with the Christmas colors of white, green, and red. It had been said that both she and her husband had worked at the Vermont Veterans Home, he on the farm while she tended to the flower gardens. Staff remember Flo as a reserved lady who liked to keep up her appearance, dressing nicely and styling her hair. She especially liked manicures and choosing the nail polish color. They also said she loved to smile, and that was her way of saying thank you for taking care of her.
Constantine Alexopoulos, also known as Dino, U.S. Marine Corps, Korean War. Dino graduated from the American Culinary Institute in Connecticut and was a main chef for the Bradley Airport, once preparing an in-flight meal for President Kennedy. He was the chef for the Skyline Drive and owned and operated a restaurant with his brothers in Massachusetts. In his younger years, Dino liked going to the gym to lift weights and box in the ring with some of his pals. When asked to describe himself, Dino said he was a proud Marine and an easygoing guy who liked everything and never complained. He stated he was a good guy and an excellent worker. Dino attended many activities at the home with his wife. Music programs, motorcycle rallies, or parades, you would find them sitting outside or inside enjoying each other's company. Dino loved music and children and would always be smiling and talking with them, especially about their Halloween costumes. Staff said he always had a smile and a laugh, along with his quick-witted comments, and kept the staff entertained. When asked what his favorite memories were, Dino said, "It's too long ago. I have none. That's why I'm here."
John Anderson, also known as Eric, U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam War. Eric noted one of his proudest moments was service to his country, and the best decision he ever made was earning a law degree at Dartmouth College. He was a judge for the Air National Guard and later was director of sales and marketing for a firm in Connecticut. He wanted to be known as a family man who was kind, funny, and charismatic, and held dear all the special memories with his family and friends. Eric enjoyed traveling and especially liked vacations in the country where he could enjoy the outdoors. Staff said he was always encouraging them to get a good education. They made sure they kept a variety of cookies for him, his favorites like Lorna Doone shortbreads and Fig Newtons. They said he liked to munch on them while he listened to his music, which varied from classical to barbershop to jazz, especially the piano playing of his favorite Stan Keaton.
Frank Babcock, U.S. Navy. Frank was extremely proud of his service, and two of his favorite memories were his assignment on the USS Enterprise, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and being flown home by the Blue Angels on 2 different occasions while on leave. He was a devout Catholic and had served as an usher in his church. He considered himself a quiet man who did not like to argue and practiced his philosophy that people should be kind to each other. Before retiring, he laid gas lines. Frank embraced his wife's Polish heritage and learned the polka. He enjoyed Polish cuisine. Frank loved to cook and to travel and going on cruises with Patricia, his wife. A tropical island or European, family was very important, and he remembered vacations to Maine and Lake George, and later trips to Long Island to visit his daughter, Heidi, and her family. He was given a Chihuahua named Taco by his daughter, Heather, to be his first buddy. Frank's granddaughter had him wrapped around their little fingers. He would fulfill their requests for special birthday cookies, whether they were cake pops or Mexican hats. Activity staff knew Frank enjoyed arts and craft, and he was very good at painting and coloring. They also knew he was a huge New York Yankees fan and a Giants fan, go Big Blue, by the number of caps he had in his room.
George Balduzzi, U.S. Navy, World War II. George, nicknamed Snoopy, was at the home for a very short time, but quickly endeared himself to the staff, as noted by all the comments from them. Their statements, always positive and happy, a great person with an infectious smile, a nice person full of warmth and kindness, reflected his philosophy of life. Be kind. At 17, he joined the Navy and was a submariner for 4 years, a position he loved. During his term of duty, he earned his high school war diploma and continued his education, earning a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry. He used his knowledge as a sales representative for U.S. Steel and W.R. Grace. He said it was his favorite job, allowing him to travel and giving him the opportunity to meet a variety of people of many different backgrounds. Snoopy was married to Louise Marie for 49 years and enjoyed a wonderful life together. They had one daughter, Diane, with whom she shared his love of animals. Together, they rescued many dogs, and their compassion was evident over a 30-year span of at least 9 dog rescues. When asked how he would like to be remembered, Snoopy said he wanted people to know he was a kind man and a nice guy. There is no doubt that his legacy of kindness and caring will never be forgotten.
Lenny Barclay, U.S. Navy, World War II. Lenny said he divided his life into thirds, 30 years in developing areas, 30 years in New Jersey, and 30 years in Vermont. After 4 years of college, he then joined the Peace Corps and was sent to the Far East, where he helped developing countries. He said it was the best decision he has ever made, and the experiences left an everlasting impression on him. Although he was in the Far East, he never made it to Singapore, a country on his bucket list. Lenny considered himself an easygoing person, a caring husband who loved his wife and their 4 children. He was a plumber by trade, enjoyed watching football, and to relax he went fly fishing. He authored books on residential plumbing and co-authored teacher edition and student edition textbooks to set the standard for practical, hands-on classroom education. Staff said he had a variety of snacks handy: chips, cookies, crackers, and cheese. He liked them all. He enjoyed sharing his adventures about his time in the Peace Corps, and a special memory that at age 6 he had met Charles Lindbergh. They also recall he had a wonderful outlook on life, always saying something positive, a quick wit and contagious smile. I also enjoyed seeing Lenny learning how to use the computer, writing his memoir in his pajamas. We were all anxious to read it.
Eugene Barrows, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Gene was not just a teacher, he was an educator. He started his career at the elementary level, and as years passed, he taught high school and eventually became a college professor. Teaching 4th through 6th grades were his favorites because they were eager and excited to learn. While in high school, he played soccer and continued playing at the college level with a thrilling experience of being a team member that won the national championship. He so loved the sport that he had coached and refereed and still watched the games while at the home. He told the staff about his soccer career and living in Brandon, and had so many stories about his daughters that he shared with the staff. Gene tried to find the good in most people, and said he would not give advice since they never follow it anyway. Staff said Gene had a dry sense of humor and had a good buddy at the home, with whom he would scheme how to escape from the VVH. He was known for his signature hat that he started wearing in his younger days. It was part of his identity that the staff relished because they knew he would not go anywhere without it, making it easy for them to track him down.
Joseph Al Ballou, U.S. Navy, Korean War. Al was a veteran and extremely proud of his service. In addition, he was a very loyal and devoted member of his local chapter of the American Legion. He was a traveling man and a storyteller as well. He had gone to school for engineering and had lived all over the country. After he retired, he went cross-country in his converted van. He had a great sense of humor, and when he told a story, there were often humorous anecdotes associated with his adventures, including his time as a volunteer for the U.S. Forest Service. Staff said he liked classical and country and Western music, loved to read, and had become a vegetarian. They also stated Al always encouraged and motivated them about their careers, or would offer advice about marriage if they wanted it or not. His favorite pastime was often reflecting about his own life stories and that of his family, reminiscing about traveling, which he so loved to do.
Axel Blomberg, U.S. Army, Korean War. During his service as a radio operator with the U.S. Army Civil Corps, Axel befriended a carpenter and learned all about the trade. Returning stateside, he was a foreman for a woodworking company. Axel was a man of many talents and had careers selling potatoes, strawberries, firewood, oil, and even deerskins. Axel was married to Donna for 60 years and she shared in his adventures. He was involved in his hometown in a few different positions. As a child, Axel had helped his father collect sap and produce maple syrup. As an adult, he had his own business in Rupert called Axel's Sugar House, where he tapped 6,000 trees and produced 1,200 gallons of syrup each year. His product was sold locally as well as internationally, with many vendors using his syrup to make a variety of products. Axel had a reputation as a sugar maker that was legendary.
Dennis Blunt, U.S. Air Force, Vietnam War. Dennis described himself as a happy, funny guy who loved nature, music, animals, and running. He especially enjoyed long-distance running and participated in a few marathons and ultramarathons, which exceed the normal 26.2 miles and are often on challenging terrains and conditions. After graduating from high school, he attended a trade school and then joined the Air Force, stating he was very proud of his service. He said his education prepared him to work as a computer programmer and an analyst. It was the best job for him besides being a dad to his children. If there was an activity or an outing at the home, Dennis was ready to go. He enjoyed walks with his friends and went on a bus trip to the Butterfly Museum with a few other members. Staff said he was always smiling and joking and was caring and a gentle soul. Born and raised in the Ozark Mountains, he said he was a happy old mountain man. The staff totally agreed and gave him the nickname Ozark Mountain Man, since they knew him as the best walker from the east of the Mississippi. He regaled them with the stories of the mountains, his races, and his mountain moonshine days, which he included making and sampling the product.
Nathaniel Boone, United States Marine Corps, World War II. After graduating from high school, Nathaniel joined the U.S. Marine Corps and served at the segregated base for African Americans at the Montfort Point, for which he was later awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, a very proud moment. He took advantage of the GI Bill and attended Bates College, where he met Harriet, his wife of 66 years. He proceeded to earn a doctorate of law through Boston University Law School and established a successful practice in New Jersey. He and Harriet bought a home in Vermont, and he became active in the Manchester community, serving on many boards and volunteering his time to local organizations for over 25 years. He also counseled prisoners at the Rutland Jail. They both were active, playing tennis and biking with the club. Nate was not at the home for long, but he clearly made an impression on the staff by sharing his philosophy and that discrimination exists and should not be tolerated because people are all the same. He encouraged the staff, saying, "You can do it. Study and obey the rules, but along the path, remember to do something good for others."
Sue Bull. She had a great sense of humor and liked to tell stories of her childhood going swimming. having picnics and playing with her twin sister and 9 other siblings. She was first and foremost a mom, saying her most important job was caring for her children. When they were no longer at home, the ever-adventurous Sue got her CDL license and drove an 18-wheeler across country with her husband. She described herself as an honest and strong woman who liked new adventures. She kept cold beer in the fridge and always had cheese and crackers on hand for visitors and ice cream for the kids. She later became a private duty home health aide to several local residents. Taking care of people was her calling. Sue was very active at home and took advantage of the activities. She painted and carved pumpkins, went to the outdoor and indoor concerts, and if something was going on, Sue sometimes wore her cowboy hat, but she always wore a smile. On nice sunny days, you could find Sue on the front porch soaking up the warm weather, and she always has a story or two to share. She said she didn't like having drama in her life, and it was much more fun to watch the soap operas and other people's problems. Staff said she liked to keep busy and always had a word search going or was coloring in one of her intricate coloring books. They said she was definitely had the artistic flair.
Donald Burns, also known as Tom, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Tom had a beautiful voice and sang hymns at Catholic Mass and with anyone who would like to join or just listen. He was a cantor for his church and was better known as the Green Mountain Cantor, always advocating for his fellow veterans. He had an extremely positive outlook on life despite the brain injury, which resulted in paralysis caused by motor shrapnel. That was the bad news. He said the good news was his name was not on the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. The irony of the injury was that he had been trained as an expert mortarman. He was awarded the Purple Heart and said the deep belief in God has been his saving grace. He had earned a bachelor's degree, owned 2 well-known bars in Bellows Falls, co-owned a few racehorses, and owned and operated Burns Realty for over 15 years. Staff enjoyed Tom. He was easygoing, kind, and appreciated the care that was given. He would tell them stories of playing the piano in his younger years, and in high school he could type 91 words a minute with no errors. Most of all, he would take requests to break into song. He even inspired a young lady to walk down the aisle to Here Comes the Sun, which Tom had sung just for her during a visit to the home. Dorothy Campbell, also known as Muggy, U.S. Air Force, Korean War. Muggy had joined the Air Force shortly after her high school graduation. It was an experience of which she was extremely proud. Muggy was a lady who liked to have things neat and organized, much like the photos of homes in her favorite magazine, Good Housekeeping. She put her energy and efforts into her career when she owned and operated a hotel, as well as keeping track of items in her antique store. Muggy had maintained a professional image at the home. She made sure she looked nice every day. If there was a music program at the home, Muggy would surely attend because she would be one of the first residents on the dance floor and one of the last to leave. She mentioned her favorite places were the beach and the kitchen because that's where family often congregated. She loved her family, children, and grandchildren, and every single visit was very special, and she kept them close to her heart. Muggy wanted to be known as a caring, helpful, and kind person, and staff would attest that she was a sweetheart of a lady, always thankful and gracious. They said she would surely be missed by all who knew and took care of her.
Mr. Clifford Chandler, U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, and U.S. Navy, Vietnam War, and Gulf War. Chandler preferred to be called Cliff. He was born in Vermont and made it known that his favorite place to be was the outdoors. He was a fisherman, and his favorite fishing spots, and like any other good sportsman, refused to share the location of his fishing holes. He was also a hunter and looked forward to the turkey seasons or hunting deer regardless of it was bow or rifle season. Cliff enlisted in the military when he was in his 20s, and his career spans 22 years, 3 branches of service, and 2 separate conflicts. He was very humble but proud of his longevity in the military and being able to serve his country for so many years. Staff said He was a feisty guy with a great sense of humor who liked to watch the old westerns like Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, and old cartoons like Bugs Bunny. Another feisty character, they said, was not unusual if he drank a gallon of milk a day. He loved his milk and may even had a snack to go with it.
Dr. Maurice Cohen, U.S. Army, Korean War. Maurice was an intellect who studied and taught philosophy, religion, and ancient civilization at many prestigious colleges. Needless to say, his favorite job was teaching and prompting discussion among his students. He not only studied Eastern religions, but had written books and was a practicing Buddhist. He was an avid reader, sometimes reading aloud, the books on nature, especially birds, and was quite content looking out the window watching the avian activity. Maurice was a sociable person and enjoyed the company of others, sometimes talking about other cultures or just simply sitting quietly with the other person. Maurice had been an avid skier and outdoorsman, keeping in shape by going to the gym and lifting weights. His dream vacation would have been to Tibet, so he could experience the origin of many of his beliefs and philosophies. The staff remembers Maurice as an exceptional man, a sweet and soft-spoken person. They said one of his favorite stories was about how he met his wife, Caroline, on the Station Island ferry. He said it was love at first sight and everlasting, a true lifelong love story.
Jeffrey Corbin, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Jeff graduated from high school and joined the Army shortly afterward, stating it was the best decision he ever made. He was only 17. Jeff was not an early riser. He liked to sleep, hinting that he might not be easy to deal with if he didn't get enough sleep. A staff member commented that he came across as a gruff person, but it was just an act. One of his favorite pastimes was listening to classical rock. Westerns, regardless of TV or movies or large print books, would keep him busy throughout the day. Jeff would watch the news just to keep up with local and world events. Even though he considered himself a quote-unquote old fart, he mentioned that his favorite holiday just happened to be his birthday, and his dream vacation would be spent in the beautiful islands of Hawaii. When asked if there was one thing people did not know about him, Jeff said he was a really smart man but hid it well. That proved to be true since he was really good at trivia but would not join the group. He liked being just outside the circle and yell out the answers.
Kenneth Corey, U.S. Army, Korean War. Ken was extremely proud of his middle name, Newman. Reflected his ancestors were two of the earliest settlers of Shasberry. He knew the value of hard work, eventually established Ken Corey Building and Contractor, and built many of the houses in Shasberry and the surrounding towns. He was a master plumber, an electrician, and was known as an honest and humble and dedicated craftsman. Ken was very competent in heavy equipment operating, whose goal was to build the affordable homes for the common man. As he aged, Ken went from building houses to sheds to dog houses and finally small wishing wells. Staff remember his stories of going to Florida as a kid in a homemade trailer. It was an adventure he would never forget. He told them to work hard as he had. It was rewarding to see a job well done and be proud of it. They asked if he had any favorites, and without thinking twice, he said riding my motorcycle and some really good fried chicken.
William Corey, U.S. Army, World War II. Bill had worked locally as a machinist and was a skilled mechanic who liked to restore motors. He had a special interest in car racing. He would sometimes watch the NASCAR races, but he said it was nothing like attending them in person. He said his favorite memory was after his 8th grade graduation. His teacher had taken him to the World's Fair. He said that she spent a lot of time helping him to read and write, and this was a special gift from her for his perseverance and successes. He wanted to be remembered as a good-hearted, if somewhat shy man who tried to be friendly and nice to everyone. Staff recalls that he had played the piano and would sometimes tinkle the keys of songs once well remembered. They also said his sparkling blue eyes would rival St. Frank Sinatra for his title of Old Blue Eyes, and that his smile would light up a room. Staff remembers he had a great sense of humor, and one staff commented after complimenting him on how good he looked after a shave and a bath. Bill said, "Yeah, Papa's got a brand new bag."
Joan Darling. Joni would visit her husband, Chape, at the home and eventually became a resident herself. They had enjoyed many years together, attending dances and other activities until his passing in 2022, after 68 years of marriage. The Darlings owned and operated a bed and breakfast called the Darling Family Inn for 20 years. While Chape took care of the physical aspects of the establishment, Joni added the artistic touches through her paintings and excellent taste in the furnishings. Joni took great pride in her appearance and said the word that best described her was pleasant. She liked everybody, which translated into caring for her friends, family, and guests. She painted pumpkins, colored in adult coloring books, knitted, and wrote letters to her friends, which is now regarded as a lost art. Although she thoroughly enjoyed running the inn, she stated her best decision was to retire. Staff remembers Joni had a sweet tooth. She liked to watch the news, game shows, or movies. Joni also enjoyed reading a book or a magazine when listening to music from her era.
Dominic Della Rosso, U.S. Army, Korean War. After his service, Dom worked as an aircraft mechanic for TWA, a career which gave him the means to care for his wife Trudy and their children, whom he dearly loved and was very proud. Dom was a man of many interests. He liked being outside hunting or watching softball, baseball, or football. He also enjoyed socializing at the local service organizations and was a member of the American Legion, Knights of Columbus, and the VFW. His religion was very important, and as a devout Catholic, Dom appreciated visits from the priest, and with his heritage also came the love of Italian food. Staff recall he liked all kinds of music from old-time country, 60s and 70s rock, and classical. They enjoyed Dom's story time when he spoke about his children and his special memories of travels with his wife. Dom even had nicknames for some of the staff. One of them was Kiddo for one of the staff members. Dom's words of wisdom to staff was, "Don't give up," and that he was always willing to help.
Mr. Dana Dix, U.S. Coast Guard, Vietnam War. After the service, Dana started his own construction company called Dana Dix Builders. A catchy name, he was extremely active and involved in his community as the chief of the fire department and an EMT, town constable, member of the American Legion, and a forest fire warden. Not one to sit around, he had activities for all seasons, fishing and boating, horseshoes and cookouts in the summer, and sugaring and snowmobile trips for the cold weather. He also enjoyed a very active social life, having dinner with friends or spending time at his camp. He was at the home for a very short time, but staff remembered he spoke about his family and his trips to Alaska with his wife, Shirley. For their 25th anniversary, he said they were great memories.
Joseph Doobie, United States Army, Korean War. Growing up in New Hampshire, Joe worked in the logging industry. He joined the Army and upon his return became a security officer at the VA hospital in White River Junction and joined the American Legion. He shared his life with Hilda, his wife, for 61 years until her passing in 2014. Staff recalls Joe showing them one of his most cherished possessions, a beautiful wooden box made by his son. He would also bring out his photo albums, the story of his family, his son growing up, and the house he had built for them. He was always smiling, pleasant and polite, and attended most of the activities at VVH, especially Las Vegas Day. He was known as the leader of the Knights of the Round Table by his group of friends on Brandon Boulevard. He was a good-natured man who took an interest in those around him, including the staff, one of whom he encouraged and inspired to try downhill skiing.
Edward Eno, U.S. Army, Korean War. Ed graduated from Vermont Technical College, entered the U.S. Army during the Korean War, and upon returning married Elizabeth. Together, they worked at many parks including Smuggler's Notch and Groton State Park. Eventually, Edward and Elizabeth moved to Emerald Lake State Park where he was the park ranger. He was very active in his local Rutland VFW and was a lifelong member of the American Legion. When his wife Betty was a resident at the home, he visited every day. Eventually, he became a resident, but we already knew him very well. Ed had been a member of a fly fishing club and took every opportunity to enjoy the sport, even at Sharon Pond. He was a trophy winner at both of the fishing derbies, but also went out on solo trips with one of the staff to help him net the fish that he caught. The staff remembers that he went to all activities. He loved children and enjoyed talking with them at the activities at the home. They said he was always talking about fly fishing, and sometimes asked if they knew someone who might be interested in learning how to fly fish. He said he was always very willing and able to teach anyone at any time about fly fishing.
Michael Frappier, United States Air Force, Vietnam War. Mike described himself as an easygoing guy who was smart, had varied interests, taught college math and science courses, and was proud that he was a positive influence on his students. Frapp said the best decision he made was joining the Air Force. He often stated his favorite place was being in his plane, either flying air shows, touring northern Vermont, or working spy planes in Vietnam. During the fall of Saigon, it is believed that Mike was the individual on the roof assisting with the evacuation. He is a Purple Heart recipient. He told staff he flew a Lockheed U-2 single-engine high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft and saw the curvature of the Earth. As a kid, Mike lived in Arizona but never got to the Grand Canyon, his dream vacation. He took up hiking the Long Trail in Jay Peak to experience the terrain of Vermont after seeing it from the air. He married Rebecca and had 2 children, of whom he is extremely proud. She regularly visited Mike, and if there was a performance or an activity, they would be there together. She said Mike was famous for saying, "I know everything about nothing and nothing about everything."
John Jack Galvin, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Jack said the best decision he made was to marry Margaret, a love that lasted for almost 57 years. His next best life path was becoming a teacher, a career that lasted for 40 years, and his commitment was recognized when he was awarded the Educator of the Year. He was a lifelong learner with special interests in literature and history. Staff said he always had a book. He loved touring Ireland with his wife and taking road trips to the ocean. He said he had never met a stranger, and being a bartender, he had the opportunity to get to know the patrons and the visitors. He was a devout Catholic, a very active family man who enjoyed his grandsons and cherished his friends. A special memory for Jack was attending spring training for the San Francisco Giants in Arizona and the Red Sox in Fort Myers. The staff recalls he was an avid New York Giants fan. Once again, go Big Blue. Jack's mantra had been life is good, and he had the ability to find humor in the moment. He advised to the staff was to find your niche in life. Whatever makes you happy, be the best that you can be.
Marshal Marty Goodell, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Marty had played Little League in his youth, and he was a huge fan of the Red Sox. After his military service ended, he took a position as a ski lift operator and took advantage of the free skiing that was a perk of the job. He later became a welder and took jobs in different states, including a time in the Dominican Republic. It is here that he appreciated the beach and sun that he would later call his dream vacation. He said it was a paradox that he hated shoveling snow, but he lived in Wilmington, Vermont. Marty was a volunteer with the Wilmington Fire Department. After 33 years, the bond formed with his fellow firefighters was unbreakable. He was a devoted husband and father who enjoyed the holiday dinners with his family. His wife, Kathy, would come and decorate his room for each of the holidays. To keep busy, he liked to read books and magazines, listen to country music, and he said he was always up to try something new, something that he'd never done before. Staff recalls that he had a great laugh and a good sense of humor. His piece of advice was, make up your mind and be happy, or find what you like and be happy. They knew something he liked and made him happy, which was peanut butter cookies.
Mr. Ronald Higgins, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Ron earned a bachelor's degree in accounting and used his knowledge serving as the town clerk for Woodford for many years. He had married Maureen, and they enjoyed 46 years together until her passing in 2012. Ron was a family man and was extremely proud of his children. He liked dogs, Italian food, telling stories, yard work, and visiting historic places he had researched. His Catholic faith was extremely important to him, attending Mass regularly and at times serving as a lector. Ron said he was the best man at many weddings and had a lot of friends because he was a people person, which proved to be true because he had soon had veteran buddies. He is always ready to go on outings without even having to be asked twice. The staff said he made sure they knew he had red rims for his glasses. They said they could get him to do anything, especially for a joke. At one time, he and a fellow veteran wore women's wigs to bingo just for kicks. Were called Linda and Sue. He kept staff entertained with his dancing and singing, especially when he would bellow out Jailhouse Rock at the top of his lungs while in the shower. Asked for a bit of advice, Ron just said, hang in there.
Dennis Jackson, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Dennis was an enigma. When you first saw him, Dennis would seem like a burly biker dude with his long beard and body language. He had been a truck driver and had lived all over the United States. He said the best days were riding his Harley solo or as part of a biker club out for a ride. Dennis liked animals, especially cats, better than he liked people. He had up to 15 cats at one time and had been married 3 times. He said the best decisions he ever made was getting divorced 3 times. He had owned his own tattoo shop and customized many tats for friends and clients. His designs were unique, original, and he could create the patterns or motifs that what his customers could only envision. Staff knew Dennis was a tattoo artist, so they set up a tattoo shop for him. Residents and staff had lined up to get one of his designs and asked his opinion which color would be best. He was ready to take the lead and give a quality product, even if it was just a temporary tattoo. Staff said that although he had been kind of a hellraiser, liked to play poker and take your chips, he was a guy with a heart of gold. He liked to tell the staff stories while he had his beard braided. Staff know that he also had a sarcastic side to his humor. Asked who he would like to have dinner with, Dennis had said either Marilyn Monroe or, wait for it, the Pope.
Stephen Jeske, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam War. Steve's 29-year career at Stafford Tech Machinist School was memorable, not only for the students, but for the success of starting the apprenticeship program at GE and for the many awards he had won. His sense of humor and easygoing style attracted Emily, his wife. When he knew she was going to visit, he would listen to Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond and ask a million times if she had arrived. Staff said that they became Neil Diamond fans because of Steve, even if they didn't know who Neil Diamond was. He enjoyed most sports, especially the New York Yankees, and was known to throw an imaginary ball across the room, surprising the staff. He liked to play imaginary catch. On golf cart rides, it was not unusual for Steve to let out a very loud "oorah" at a passing golf cart, and would say he was a loud and proud Marine. Staff said he had a great sense of humor and was known for his "Hey, how you doing?" and brightening up their days with his stories and fun-loving attitude. They said there was never a dull moment when Steve was around. Marilyn Kenyon, Marilyn enjoyed the daily pleasures that come with family life. She had married Francis and spent nearly 60 years of her life with him. They had 5 children, and they are her pride and joy. She was known as a classy lady who never said a bad word about anyone. She was also known to have a spunky personality, and maybe that is why she was proud to have made it to her 101st birthday. She had a sweet tooth. Marilyn liked cake and ice cream, or apple pie with ice cream, or anything sweet and ice cream. However, she liked her coffee with just cream, but her choice of beverage was usually water. Marilyn was a doodler, enjoyed puzzles, and always had a magazine like Good Housekeeping or a book within easy reach. Marilyn was a member of the Baptist Church in North Bennington, singing in the choir and being very active in her church group Kindred Spirits. Her faith was very important to her, and it was evident in her love of not only her children, but her role as a house mother and working the cafeteria line at the high school. Staff said they could hear Marilyn singing songs from the 30s and 40s. She liked to sit by the windows and look out at the birds, but her favorite were butterflies, the color and shapes, and because they were just so beautiful.
Ruth Kessick. Ruth described herself as being a talkative lady who enjoyed company. If there was something special going on at the home, you could be sure she was in attendance. Ruth had 2 milestone birthdays at the home. The staff said they were very fortunate to be able to celebrate her 100th and her 101 birthdays. Her family and friends brought cake and ice cream and a few presents. She said the best decision she had made was marrying her husband, because he gave her a loving family whose visits she cherished. She would often reminisce about being in the backyard with her husband and children eating apple pie and ice cream, her favorite dessert. Many staff said Ruth was one of the kindest and sweetest people they had ever met in their entire lives. Ruth never let anyone stand in the way of what she wanted to do. Even though she was legally blind, she was determined to explore every inch of the Veterans Home inside and out. She thoroughly enjoyed the golf cart rides with the activity staff. Staff said Ruth was always smiling and had one to share with everyone. They also recalled Ruth walking over to Brandon every day to visit her sister Alice, and made a daily trip to the chapel and walked outside after telling the staff not to worry because she had been finding her own way her whole life.
Ralph Kenny, United States Navy, Vietnam War. Ralph described himself as a happy-go-lucky kind of guy with a great sense of humor. He enjoyed being an independent, self-employed carpenter, which gave him the freedom to make choices between working or going fishing. He said some of his best memories were his time in the Navy and at his home in Rutland with his pet dog. Although he did some traveling while in the service, Ralph said his dream vacation would be someplace warm, like Florida. His favorite holiday was the 4th of July, and remembered grilling steaks and hot dogs and having all the other trimmings for a picnic. Staff remembers he liked to listen to rock and roll. He liked being outside and took advantage of the golf cart rides around the grounds. He was a fan of the Red Sox and watched the games when they were on the television. If not, you would find him reading Sports Illustrated or flipping through the National Geographic and munching on cheese nips. Robert Kirby, United States Army, Vietnam War. Bob had been the manager of the Aerospace Division at General Electric. He enjoyed the simple pleasures of life, like having breakfast at the local diner or sitting on the front porch with his wife, Michelle, to whom he had been married for 47 years. Bob was a loving family man who had attended and cheered for his son and daughter and nieces at school events. Bob was a devout Catholic and practiced the tenets of the religion, showing kindness to everyone he met. He was also an active member of the Elks. When not spending time with his family, he liked to go hunting or fishing or even spending some alone time in his garden. After weeding the garden, Bob was known to enjoy a cold PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer from the fridge. His pastimes at the home included listening to baseball games on the radio or finding a channel that played the golden oldies. He was also known for his great sense of humor. Staff said he liked to sit by the aquarium and watch the fish. He said it was very relaxing. Maybe that is why he was always telling his staff, go with the flow.
Adrian LaFlamme, also known as BIT, U.S. Army, Korean War. BIT was the kind of person who found joy in life, whether it was being a father of 3 children, husband to his loving wife Joanne of 44 years, or being the crossing guard for Sacred Heart St. Francis School. He said he was a devout Catholic, said his prayers every night, and said he had the best marriage ever. He was proud to have given his family a good life, and that was the best any man could ask for. After the service, he had been a logger, but eventually worked for CB Sports and later at NASTEC as team tech. He was a civic-minded person belonging to the Moose, the VFW, and the American Legion. Bitt liked attending the meetings because they were opportunities to socialize with his friends, playing scat, a card game, shooting darts, and playing pool. He was also an outdoorsman who was fond of hunting and fishing. Staff said he described himself as having a good sense of humor, a jokester. He said he was a good, honest, and hardworking man who had nothing to complain about and liked just about everything, especially ice cream and cake, peanut butter and crackers.
Robert Machera, United States Army, World War II. Bob's interests and talents were linked to his appreciation of art and classical music, which he employed in his business as the owner and CEO of Machera Advertising in New York City. His artistic skills were extremely useful during the war. He was interviewed by another veteran at the home and shared his experiences of making 3D maps many times, having to revise the terrain with up-to-date information he was given for the D-Day invasion. He said it brought back memories and it would have been nice to have been able to meet and talk with some of his old war buddies. Staff remember Bob was a rather private individual until you asked about his family. He said his best decision was marrying his beautiful wife, Josephine, with whom he had 2 children. Family was extremely important to him and was often relayed to staff to love your family, love your wife. Family is most important, and to keep in contact with them and the grandchildren. He is to be awarded the French Legion of Honor Award posthumously for his extremely important role for making topographical maps for the D-Day invasion.
David Mantell, U.S. Navy, peacetime. Everyone knew David on Brandon Boulevard. He was the one who did his 3 daily laps around his unit wearing his Birkenstock sandals. He would shuffle along with his walker and stop a few times, not to rest, but to check out something that was very interesting. At times, the interesting things were boxes in the mailroom, which he had a tendency to open, even if they were not addressed to him. After his walks, Dave would be found sitting next to the pool table reading a book. He was a voracious reader and had a book going at all times. David practiced yoga, but only in the privacy of his room. He was a devout Buddhist, practicing his beliefs in a very quiet way. During his lifetime, David worked in a military hospital, was a truck driver, and worked farms and did odd jobs. Staff described David as a genius of a guy with a very gentle heart and soul.
Alfred Mack, or Al McAllister, U.S. Navy, Korean War. I met Mac the first day that he came to the Veterans Home, and it was on that day that he decided my name was Amy instead of Asa. For years to come, every day I saw him, I'd say, "Hi, Mac, it's Asa," and he'd say, "Hi, Amy." Mac was raised in New York City, but was well known in the area after moving to Vermont, where he worked for the Green Mountain Park racetrack for 25 years. He said it was the best job ever. He and his wife, Kathleen, had owned and operated a residential facility in Arlington, which they later converted into a delightful New England-style B&B. He was a fan of New England teams, Yankees, Patriots, and the Giants. Mac stated he was proud of his successes as a businessman, including the start of a ski lodge after leaving IBM. Mac described himself as a crazy and fun guy who liked peace and quiet and did not like loud people. He often joked with the staff. Most of the time they were dirty jokes, and they thoroughly enjoyed his sense of humor. He was known to have a joke or two and was an excellent storyteller, always humorous. They said he was a generous and fun person, and he will be missed by many.
Mr. Roger Menard, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Roger was an outdoorsman who spent much of his time as possible hunting and fishing. He stated that he wanted to go hunting one last time, and the VVH made that wish come true. With the assistance of a civic organization, a customized wheelchair with tracks instead of wheels, camo outfit, and hunting gear were acquired to take him on that one last hunting trip on private land that the landowner had made available for the outing. In his prior years, he had been an excellent chef at many renowned restaurants in Rhode Island, and after changing careers, becoming a carpenter who built his home in Massachusetts, he was a Boy Scout leader and coached his son's baseball teams. Staff stated that Roger often entertained them with stories of his escapades and exploits in the Army while driving a tank in Germany. When kicking back, he listened to Johnny Cash or other classic country artists, or would catch a Western movie or game show having a cup of coffee and wanting to smoke.
Robert Norton, United States Air Force, peacetime. Bob had stayed in his room when he first came to the home, but with the coaxing from staff and activities in nursing, he had participated in the activities. Who would have thought that he would go to the exercise group, play Uno, and have bingo as his favorite activity? He had an interesting resume of professions, from bus driver to construction worker. Bob liked to snack on popcorn and chips, apples and oranges while he listened to bluegrass music. He surprised the staff when they asked him if he had pets. They never thought he would have said he had cattle as pets. He enjoyed the outdoors, hunting and fishing and mowing lawns. Bob was very proud of his service in the Air Force and would have liked to been stationed in Hawaii, and he said that never happened, but it would still be his dream vacation. He had said he lived a simple life, no regrets, and mostly good memories. Staff recall he liked to go to groups, that he always had a smile on his face, and would banter with his fellow players. He had a great sense of humor and would play a game asking new staff to go with him to get his truck, knowing there was no truck. William Bill Noyes, United States Air Force, Vietnam War. Bill got the traveling bug during his 4 years in the Air Force. He was ready to go on a moment's notice to his next adventure with his family. Special memories are family trips to Sunset Beach, North Carolina, and the trip of a lifetime to Ireland with Laurie Ann, his wife of 60 years. Bill said his best decision was marrying his wife and attributed his style of dress to his wife. He said, "Imagine a big tall guy like me wearing pink and purple." He worked at various jobs and eventually landed at Williams College in dietary and security. With his degree in horticulture, he became the groundskeeper at Williams College, a position lasting 30 years. Not one to sit still for long, Bill enjoyed skiing, mountain biking, horseback riding, and swimming. He had called himself a good guy and often helped his wife with the at-home child care she operated. Bill told stories to the children to give her a break and soon became a surrogate granddad to most of the kids. Staff remember his stories about his travels and working hard to provide for his family in the early years. He encouraged them to have a good work ethic because there was pride in doing a job well.
Thomas Pavliga, U.S. Army. Tom was described as a quiet man by the staff. They would spend time talking with him even though he was unable to talk. He would give them a smile, letting them know he was listening. Staff said that Tom liked snuggling with the stuffed animal the staff had named the Sloth, which looked like a monkey with long arms and legs, was warm and had a heartbeat. He cuddled the stuffed animal and it gave him great pleasure and comfort. In his earlier years, Tom had been a math teacher and was involved in the sports programs at the high school. He was a track and field coach. Students knew that they could get on his good side if they bribed him a little. So they made sure that when they wanted to or needed something from the coach, they brought donuts.
Mr. Danny Pacino, U.S. Army, Operation Iraqi Freedom. Danny stated he liked to work on his own and did not like rules, which is a little surprising since he said the best decision he ever made was joining the Army. He was very proud of his service and was a VFW Gold Star Legacy member. He was a very dependable and skilled employee working for a property management firm which allowed for flexibility in his job. He said he had many accomplishments in his life, attributing his success to the encouragement of his wife, Sandra. He had raced snowmobiles, loving the oval ice racing, and during his racing career was ranked #1 on the ARC snowmobile racing circuit. On the other hand, Danny enjoyed warm beaches and playing volleyball. His biggest passion, however, was encouraging soldiers to become aware of the burn pit registry after his disease was diagnosed from exposure to the burn pits. He had met with senators and reporters advocating for the government to stop burn pits. By all accounts, Danny was a loving husband, father, and grandfather and friend. A devout Catholic, his faith never faltered, and thanked God for the time he had with his family.
Edward Pete Racine, United States Marine Corps, World War II. At 92 years old, blind in one eye and having trouble seeing out of the other, Pete was trying to get into the Guinness Book of World Records for being the oldest person to intentionally flip and roll a car. After succeeding, he did a celebratory dance and then sent a recording of the stunt to confirm this successful rollover. Pete said he always cared for nice people and those who were nice to him. He considered himself to be honest and outspoken and could put someone in his or her place without offending the person. He had a great sense of humor, which came in handy as an auto salesman and manager. He was a gifted drummer and had played in bands, preferring jazz and honky-tonk music. Once Pete found an interest, he dove in with both feet and found out all he could about antique dolls, clocks, vintage cars, and motorcycles. He was always very busy, and when he had to slow down a little, he found his talent painting on canvas. His special memories were of his wife, riding his motorcycle, and his many adventures, which he was very willing to share with the staff. They said he tried to come across as being grumpy, but the twinkle in his eye always gave his teasing away.
Paul Stansel, U.S. Army, Korean War, and Vietnam War. If anything, you never had to second guess how Paul felt about an issue. He was a straight shooter and didn't mince words. For instance, he said he hated listening to the news because it was a bunch of garbage, not even good garbage. Despite the rough exterior, he liked to read, and even though he was not a stellar student in high school, he earned a PhD in education. During his 25 years in the Army, he took advantage of everything that was offered, including vacations paid for by the Army. Paul liked stock car racing and did not want to be bothered when working on something or when he was watching the races. Staff recalls he regaled them with stories about being an airplane and helicopter pilot, which were his favorite jobs, and crashing choppers and surviving to tell them about it. He made his harrowing experiences sound like adventures, not the dangerous situations they really were. Anything for a laugh, and he was a really great storyteller. They say he was always singing and wore his signature bathrobe that usually had peanuts in the pockets. Staff said Paul always told them that the pins on his hat told his life story.
Mr. Charles Tobin, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Chuck joined the service directly after school. After his discharge, he started to work as a sheet metal fabricator, which became his favorite job and his career. Chuck had 2 grandchildren and 2 children who said they were aware that their dad had quite a collection of Steins and Eagles. He took up a new hobby and became a candle maker. They said that while he was working, he had listened to bluegrass music or rock and roll, especially Elvis Presley. Charles had a reputation that he would do almost anything for a laugh. Competition bingo with his buddies was an all-time favorite activity at their bingo table. Staff remembers he was always listening to music. He was a NASCAR fan and watched the races, particularly when Dale Earnhardt, his most favorite driver, was behind the wheel. He usually had a bowl of salt and buttered popcorn in his lap during the races. He said he was at home. There would have been beer in the chair next to him.
John Jack Tremblay, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Jack had been an electrician by trade and loved gadgets and tinkering. He received many envelopes and packages from China to see how he could make his computer run faster and better, so he could play games and run searches more easily. He was always playing games and finding new things to add to his collection of electronic gadgets, keeping the staff guessing what he was up to in his room. Jack had a great sense of humor, and when asked if he had any favorites, like colors, holidays, or food, he would say no to all of them. He said you would never find asparagus in his refrigerator, but you could always find a beer. Staff said he loved to play jokes on them, especially with a clown doll that would come alive and scare the new unsuspecting LNAs. He was also known for the storm cloud in his room and for passing out dog treats while having candy for the staff and loving to have kids come and visit him. Jack was a very good person and developed friendships with many other veterans. Upon his passing, a fellow veteran wrote about him, "Friends like you give me a reason to laugh every day. Your heart will be with me as I complete my journey home. Thanks for sharing your sense of humor. Jack will be missed by many, by the staff and his veteran friends."
Richard Vitagliano, U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Staff said Richard kept them laughing with his sarcastic answers. He was quite a jokester, and it was not uncommon for him to come up with some kind of prank. He had a good sense of humor and usually kept them guessing at what he was up to next. Richard said his best decision was to marry his beloved Bonnie, to whom he had been married for 58 years. He was a great family man and did not mind one bit that his two daughters had him wrapped around their little fingers. He had a special gift, making friends easily and also taking care of them, giving his time and energy to help any way he was able. Richard knew how to throw a party and cook for an army, always having cold beer and Diet Coke on hand. Richard's quick wit and sense of humor made him someone you always wanted to be around because you knew you would have a good time.
Robert Waite, U.S. Air Force, Korean War. Bob was at the home for a very short time, but he quickly became known as a genuinely nice man. Bob's career was in sales, whether it was cars, jewelry, or shoes. And when he retired from selling shoes at age 84, the manager said she was losing the best employee she had ever had. Bob loved baseball, and even though he followed the Red Sox, his all-time favorite team was the St. Louis Cardinals. He was known to listen to the radio when the games were broadcast. His Catholic faith was very important to him, and he had been an usher at his church for many years. Bob was my neighbor for 20 years. He told us one of his favorite childhood memories was going for ice cream with his dad after church. Bob joined our family for holiday dinners, Easter breakfasts, family reunions, gave treats to our dogs, and was a babysitter when we needed help. Bob also loved sweets, and especially liked the strawberry shortcakes brought by his niece, Jeannie. He also liked cookies and cakes. This is the man I knew, the man the family knew, that Bob was genuinely a good guy.
Alfred Walters, U.S. Navy, Vietnam War. After his service in the U.S. Navy, Al said he made the best decision ever when he married the love of his life, Cora Lee, with whom he spent 66 years with and raised a family. His favorite memories were going for rides on his Harley with his wife. His love of buying and customizing bikes and cars was his second love. Al began his 35-year career in law enforcement in the New York State as a police officer, which ended in Vermont working for the State Attorney General's office. Afterwards, he had his own private detective agency. He loved to share his stories as a state trooper with the staff. Al was extremely proud of his service in the Navy and had been a member of the VFW, the Elks, and the American Legion. His religion was very important, and because of his beliefs and faith in marriage, he said he thought he was a really good guy. If you asked how he would describe himself, Al said he was a kind and respectful man who was funny, friendly, and loving. And if you were to ask the staff about Al, they would be totally on board with that. He was all of that and more.
Lawrence Woodard, U.S. Air Force, Vietnam War. Larry was a resident at the home for only 4 months, but endeared himself to the staff. They said he never complained and gave them one of his smiles, even when he was in pain. In the short time he was here, staff found out that he was an avid Red Sox and Jets fan and watched all the games. If there was no baseball or football, he would find another game to watch. He loved sports. His career was in environmental management. He liked cookouts with the family and being outdoors. Larry liked to go on the internet and scroll around to find something interesting to share because he liked talking with people and was a good conversationalist. Staff said he was a very kind man. They said his go-to sweets were chocolate, strawberries, and he loved cheesecake. They mostly remember he had a great sense of humor, and whenever asked whether or not they could give him care, his standard answer was always, okie dokie.